When it's just after 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and start. I want to thank you for being here tonight and for taking an interest in the future of our community. I'm honored to welcome you to this Mayor's Community Forum on the Westminster Historic District project update. Before I begin any farther, I just wanted to take a minute and recognize in the audience with us tonight, we have Council President Tony Cavacci, and we have council members Kevin Dayhoff, and I swear I saw Dan Hoff, right? And Councilmember Dan Hoff in the back there as well. So I'm just doing an introduction and sort of the MC, I guess, for the evening. Well, I guess Chris is really the MC for the evening, but our historic district is one of our city's greatest assets. It tells the story of who we are, where we've been, and helps guide where we're going. As Westminster continues to grow and evolve, it's important that we take a thoughtful look at how we preserve that character while supporting a vibrant and livable downtown. Tonight is about listening, learning, and sharing. We want to make sure that this process reflects the voices of our residents, property owners, and business community. Your input will help shape decisions that impact Westminster for years to come. I want to thank our staff, partners, and everyone who has contributed to this effort so far, and I encourage you to stay engaged throughout the process. If you haven't noticed, there are some sign-in sheets on the back where you can leave an email and phone number as well to stay aware of the process. So thank you once again for being here and your continued commitment to our city. And with that, I'd like to introduce Chris McMasters, who is the chair of Westminster's Historic District Commission.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. How are we this evening? Weather's great. And this evening, we have a great meeting for you. We've been wanting to do this for so long. Let me tell you a minute or two about how we got to this point of inviting the public in and reevaluating our historic resources. So, does anybody remember the bicentennial? I remember the bicentennial. That was so much fun. Of course, I was a teenager. Everything was fun. But I had a great time with the bicentennial. Part of what this city did for the bicentennial was to take an inventory of historic structures throughout the city. And not just along Main Street, but a block or two off Main Street and along Pennsylvania Avenue. It was a new idea with the National Register to register all these historic structures so that as we grew and as we changed over time, we would know where our crown jewels of history really were. So we took an inventory, and at that time we came up with some 1,400 structures. Okay. Now, how long ago was the bicentennial? 50 years ago. Things change. Any kind of inventory like that is not going to be able to stay static. It's not going to be able to remain the same. So I've been involved as a volunteer to the city on the Historic District Commission over 20 years now. And I've seen a few things come and go. And I hate to say it, but sometimes the response I get when I say, why do we let that historic structure get demoed? Or what happened here? Why do we lose that spot? Many times people say, I didn't even know I was in the historic district. I didn't even know there was a historic district. Well, we've spent a few years thinking about how do we change that. One of the very first steps, however, is to redo our inventory so we have a nice fresh list of what's historic, what really matters to us. And if we lose it, it's a little bit like losing your front teeth in your smile. Sure, you can chew without that front tooth, but it doesn't look good. And we really care about being a historic Westminster. We have that on our flag. So this is a new chance at looking at our structures. It's a new chance of reaching out to all our homeowners. We're not changing the boundaries at all, not for now. We're just re-looking and reevaluating and recounting and trying to figure out where our historic structures are, how they look, and then over 50 years, some things become historic. So we'll add some stuff. Now let's talk a little bit about the Historic District Commission, one of my favorite topics. And Here we go. Melissa's one of our city liaisons. She makes everything work a little better around here. All right. So the city of Westminster has a historic district. That district was established 1978-ish. It was researched then, right, for the bicentennial, kind of became more official in the 80s. But it has a commission that is all volunteer. And we try really hard to have people who are only city residents who only live in the historic district. So it matters to them, right? They got a little skin in the game. We do look for homeowners and we do look for business owners, but we want those commissioners to be people who really live in the district. And we're all volunteers. Next slide. Oh my goodness. All right. So we do have public meetings. We do meet the first Wednesday of every month currently and have been up at Emerald Hill at our city hall, which was built in 1838. The meetings begin now at 6 o'clock. Hopefully people who work can make it by that time. And you'll want to check the city website for any schedule changes. And there can be a couple schedule changes, like sometimes in December, there's not enough business to meet. So we will skip December. But for the most part, it's the first Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock. Okay. And there's always time for public comment on our schedule, always. So you can get up and ask us anything you want. Our agenda is published. And it's not the only time we can meet. If someone has a real difficulty, they can ask us for a special meeting, and we're more than happy to meet. Okay, next slide. Incentive programs. We really have two incentive programs. The facade improvement program is actually kind of a little new to me. This has not just always been around. This is special, and it's fantastic. It has a narrow area of eligibility. It is along Main Street, basically, and it's for exterior. But what's cool about it is you can get reimbursement of 50% as long as those improvements are approved and you do those improvements after approval. You can't do whatever work you want and then come back to us and ask for approval. It's not one of these, do something and then ask for forgiveness later. You have to ask in advance, and it can be businesses. Melissa, can it be residential as well? Facade improvement then is only for commercial businesses. Okay. As you might guess, Melissa knows everything about this particular program. She is the gateway to filling out simple paperwork. And then it gets put before us and we'll make decisions every month on it. Okay. But 50% isn't bad. The tax credit program, which is our second tool, is really the one I know most about because we've had this tax credit program for as long as I've been volunteering. It is a tax credit program that's set up to mimic the state and federal tax credits that are available for rehabbing historic homes and businesses. And this can go inside and outside. So it's not just a facade, it's interior as well. The city will offer you 10% of the cost of any improvement over $5,000 done within 2 years. It all has to be pre-approved. You have to be up to your taxes. You can't be having taxes in arrear and then expecting an incentive tax credit. You have to have your taxes all paid up, but 10% of the cost of that approved project can be given to you. Now, you might say, what good is 10%? Well, our rules are the same as the state, and they have a 20% incentive. And if you have a commercial structure, the feds have a 20% incentive. And you can apply for all three, right? 20, 20, and 10, 50% of your project if it's commercial and it approves. We have the same rules as the state. We have a one-page application, super simple. And we'll help you with the state and federal tax credit pages. I'll be more than willing to help people out. Now imagine if you qualify for this facade improvement grant and the tax credits. I've never seen that done, but I know it's possible. Imagine That's a pretty good deal for people who live or who have commercial structures in the historic district and work with us. All righty. Now, what else can we do? We can offer recommendations. We can look at your architectural changes and help you out on your applications. We can talk about new development. We actually have an allowance for 5% on infill new development that matches the historic structures. So let's say you have an empty blank slate. We can help on 5% with the tax credit. It's not 10%, but it's 5, and that's not bad. And then lastly, we do have demo permits. So if you're going to do any kind of demolition in the historic district, got to go through us. And we'll look at those demo permits and maybe try and help you rethink about your building. Maybe it's not as bad as you think it is. Maybe we can talk you maybe into thinking twice about demoing it, and maybe repurposing it, or maybe using tax credits to help save it. Standards for renovations. So we, as I said, we have the same type of credit as the state and the feds do. We have the same type of renovation standards as the state and the Fed. So there's really no daylight between how the state does their work and how the feds do their work in rehab of historic structures. The same thing, so that you don't get confused between shifting gear with the state and the feds. If we say, for instance, some kind of brick is best recommended, the state and the feds will say the same thing. If we suggest that what you have is metal, should be replaced with metal, or wood should be replaced with a wood composite, or plastic should be replaced with plastic. Whatever we're looking at, it's the same recommendation as the state and the Fed. Those standards are available online, so there should be no mystery. Okay. If you need any help in considering projects, just give us a call. We'll happily help you out. Melissa knows a whole lot about it. My card's in the back, and we're more than happy to be helpful in helping you preserve that historic fabric. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have a project website that goes with our regular online presence for the Historic District Commission. You'll want to look at that for the NR update. It will have our meetings, and really, hopefully we'll hit the mark on why this matters. Again, to protect our historic resources, support the eligibility for preservation initiatives and grants, provide accurate documentation for future planning, celebrate our historic inventory for the 250th, if nothing else, and then look at funding through the Maryland Historic Trust and their non-capital grants program. And in fact, this particular project is supported by the Maryland Historic Trust and its non-capital grants program. And Jessica French is here. Are you going to say a word or two? Come on up. She's our grant manager, so she's going to tell us a little bit, I hope, about our grant funding.
Hello, I'm Jessica French with the Maryland Historical Trust. Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm the National Register Administrator and the grant manager for this particular grant. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the trust and the National Register. And then after me comes Elizabeth Comer, and she'll get to the fun stuff, which is the actual research and documentation that the folks have been working on. But since you're all here tonight and most likely received the letter, you all live inside a National Register Historic District. So hopefully this gives you a little context about what it means, what it doesn't mean, and the benefits of being there. So Maryland Historical Trust is the state's Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, and we're charged with preserving and interpreting the legacy of Maryland's past. MHT began as a nonprofit in 1961, but when the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 was passed, each state was required to establish a SHPO to carry out the federal preservation programs like the National Register of Historic Places, and MHT became an entity of state government and the SHPO. So the National Register recognizes districts, buildings, structures, objects, and sites for their significance in American history, archaeology, architecture, engineering, or culture. And it's the main way to identify them as what's worthy of preservation, where should we put our grant funding resources, where should tax credit money be directed to. This is the way we decide what's significant and what we should put our preservation energy into. So the National Register is a program of the Department of Interior, the National Park Service, but it is administered at the state level by MHT, and every state has to follow sort of the same procedures. Every state has a state historic preservation office, and the idea is that people on the local level are the ones who know what are your historic resources, what do people want to see saved. So right now we have approximately 1,630 listings on the National Register in Maryland, and that covers over 100,000 contributing resources. So Westminster would be considered one listing, but of course there are 1,000 or more resources within the district. So it's wide ranging, but in comparison on our Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties, which is a bigger statewide list that is not a designation program. It's just for research and documentation. We have about 45,000 records. So the National Register is really what rises to what's very historically significant and where we're putting our resources. So through Medusa, MHT's online cultural database, users can explore properties included in the MIHP, which is what is maintained by us, and it's outlined in red when you search on Medusa. And then what is listed in the National Register of Historic Places, which is officially maintained by the National Park Service, and when you search on our map is outlined in purple. So some of the benefits of being listed are an official recognition of a property's significance. So you have a document that writes down all the historic information about a place, what makes it important. It's the threshold for financial incentives for preservation. So that includes rehabilitation tax credits, in some cases, capital grant programs, local incentives also kind of usually mirror or follow National Register listing. And you get some consideration in planning for state and federal projects through the Section 106 process, which is what is inscribed in the law on the national level. And then also in Maryland, we have a statewide program that mirrors Section 106. And in general, it can increase the awareness and appreciation of local, state, and Maryland's role in national history. So instead of restrictions, the program utilizes incentives. So if grant money or tax credits are used for a project, they must follow the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, which Chris very nicely explained, which is a list of best practices for treating historic buildings and structures. And usually at the local level is where you get more restrictions. But when you're listed in the National Register, there are no restrictions on private property owners. So it's all benefits. If you decide to take advantage of the tax credit program or grant programs or others, then you need to follow those standards. But being in a National Register district doesn't restrict you in any way. There's no worry that the federal government is going to try to buy your property. You don't need to make it accessible to the public. It really just is a recognition of the importance of a place. So to be listing on the National Register can include a wide variety of types. We have prehistoric archaeology sites. We have buildings of the recent past. Some things we're nominating were built now in the late 1970s into the 1980s. It could be rural landscapes, urban and suburban neighborhoods. We have everything, including sailing vessels in our inventory. But some of our most one of our most nominated things are districts. So to be eligible, a property must demonstrate significance at the local, state, or national level in terms of one or more four broad criteria, which is events and trends in history, association with individuals who made a demonstrable and lasting contribution, architecture, the potential to yield information that will contribute to a better understanding of our past. Usually that criteria is used for archaeology, but not always. Sometimes special building techniques or something can yield a criterion D. You only need to meet one criteria to be listed, but usually properties end up being eligible under more than one. And then the second part is that once you meet a criteria, you must also retain physical integrity to reflect that significance. So the first step when we evaluate a property for the National Register is research to establish and describe the historic context. So historic context is usually described as all the historic circumstances from which a property emerged. Context can vary with resources, and properties can reflect multiple contexts, but this just allows us to compare between similar resources and understand the relative importance of a property and what its significance might be. And then we also look at it, is it important to local history, state history, or national history? All nominations also have a defined period of significance, which is the length of time when a property or district was associated with the important event, activity, or persons, or attained the characteristics which qualify it for National Register listing, which can be the time when an event occurred. We have a couple battlefields that are just a few days when the battle happened. It could be the span of time when the property was part of a trend. So when we're talking about Westminster, it's the county seat. It's always been important in politics and government, and it continues to be. So that would span a wider range of time. The time the property was associated with a person, or sometimes when something's nominated under architecture, it might just be the date of construction. It might be a range of dates if there are many additions and it's showing the change over time of different architectural types and styles. But that's generally what we think about when we're defining a period of significance. So then once the historic context and period of significance are established, that's when you do your assessment of integrity. So you have to, the National Park Service has defined 7 aspects of integrity that we use to evaluate whether or not a property has integrity. So those are location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. So those all have very technical definitions, but generally the idea is when you're standing in a place, does it reflect what it looked like in history? Is it directly, can you prove that it's directly associated with an event? Sometimes that can be a little trickier when it's something like an important speech was given. Do you have a newspaper record that says, yes, they were standing in front of this building, or could it have been the building next door? You need to establish like the actual association. The setting is generally, is it still urban? Is it still rural? Or has that changed over time? Location is pretty straightforward, but buildings do move. So sometimes buildings are moved out of their context and out of their location, and they may not be eligible anymore. So in order to do this, you establish the essential physical features of what a property must have in order to reflect its significance. So it would depend on the criteria you're being listed for, the period of significance, what do you start looking for in a property. So for a district to retain integrity as a whole, most of the components must possess integrity, and you're really looking at the relationship among the components that are substantially unchanged. So in Westminster, we're looking at the streetscapes, generally the street layout. So maybe individual buildings have undergone changes, but when you're in the historic district, you recognize it as historic. You recognize the narrower streets. You recognize the older building styles. So it's not as important if necessarily, certain materials have changed over time or there's new infill. You're looking at it as a whole. There are several property types that are considered ineligible for the National Register as a rule. But of course, there's exceptions to all those rules. So those are the criteria considerations. Generally for districts, these are less important because some of the exceptions to almost all of those things that can't be listed, if they're inside a district and have contributed to the history, they can come in. So those are cemeteries, birthplaces, religious properties, moved structures, reconstructed historic buildings, commemorative properties, and properties less than 50 years old. But for the most part, those are not so important. The less than 50 years old is probably the one that applies most to districts when we're defining a period of significance, unless something really exceptional has happened within the past 50 years, you would normally end the period of significance about 50 years before when you're preparing the nomination. So the current nomination dates from 1980. So all that great information Chris was talking about was gathered during the bicentennial. It was written down in the National Register form and officially listed now 46 years ago. So it was written before more of the formal procedures of the National Register program were defined. But generally, when we look at the nomination, we think it's nominated under A and C. So for its architecture and for its events and trends in history. The many areas of significance were checked in the original form. So those were architecture, agriculture, commerce, politics and government, social history, transportation. And then we did a very brief update in 2024 as part of the women's suffrage program that added social history, women's history, but it didn't change any of the facts of the nomination. It just noted that Westminster had a chapter of the Just Government League, and many women in the city were working towards suffrage. And it also doesn't have really a defined period of significance, but we would say, based on the context, circa 1764 when it's laid out through 50 years of when it was prepared, 1930. So generally, any historic buildings that fall within those dates would be considered contributing to the nomination, and what's listed and what's already eligible for some of those incentive programs. And Elizabeth, who is coming next, will explain to you updating the context and the period of significance and what that might mean for having a broader range of properties that are eligible. So generally, the process of a National Register nomination takes a long time. It can take 9 months to a year to go from very beginning to when it's finally with NPS and officially listed. So right now, the team is gathering their information, working on doing the draft. It will come to MHT, where we'll do a staff review of the nomination, send back any comments. Once we have basically a final draft, it gets scheduled for a governor's consulting committee, which is the state review board for National Register nominations in Maryland. The board considers it. They have meetings in February, May, and October. Once it passes a GCC meeting, then we send it to NPS, and they take usually about 45 days to officially give us an answer on the listing. So that whole process, there's regulatory deadlines along the way, which is what sometimes lengthens the process, but generally looking at like a year from now to get the new stuff officially listed. And then, as Chris also mentioned, MHT has 3 historic tax credit programs that anyone who's currently in the boundary and generally within the period of significance considered contributing to the nomination could take advantage of, and perhaps more people once the update is complete. So they're competitive commercial, which is for expenses over $500,000, small commercial for commercial properties with expenses under $500,000, and the homeowner historic tax credit project, which is generally a primary or secondary residence that's not income producing, that can take advantage of that credit. And it's 20% on your eligible expenses, capped at $50,000 for small commercial and homeowner, and technically no cap on competitive commercial, but it depends on how much funding we have each year. And those can also stack for the commercial projects with the federal tax credit. And then homeowner can work with the local tax credits as well. So I left cards in the back and flyers that have all of this information where you could peruse and talk to our tax credit folks if you're interested in taking advantage. But generally, it can fund things like roof replacement and repair, window restoration, selective door and window replacement, new storm doors, HVAC, plumbing, electrical work, anything to make your historic building more functional but generally not more interior design type items. Just depends. Okay, so I can answer any questions right now. I also left my cards in the back if you have any questions. Sure.
Get a historic tax credit, you are limited in what you can do. You are limited into how the changes that you can make to the inside of the structure. Is that not correct?
That is correct. All work is reviewed, so they all need to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. So
Well,
things like,
but for us
yeah.
lay people that don't have that off, that means you cannot like bust through walls and stuff.
Correct.
Like
We
that.
would look at things like layouts staying generally the same. You can do, there's, the thing is, everything is on a case by case basis, so it sort of depends. But yes, we do review all work that's being done, and no new construction can be funded with the Maryland tax credit either.
No new construction, but you,
Yeah.
like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like if you're, like trying to make the inside a little bit more modern, okay, you're not going to like that, correct?
Well, I don't review tax credits, but
But I'm saying the tax
yes,
credit.
there can be limitations on what you can do, even on the inside with the tax credit, but that you can, I always recommend talking your project through with the tax credit folks, and then they can say if they think, yes, there's eligible projects and expenses there, and then you can do the form, or they can say, no, we probably can't fund that, so don't start the application process. Yeah.
Because if I'm taking money for the exterior, I'm still limited on what I'm doing
Yeah.
on the interior for a period of time, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that's clear because I remember checking this before.
We review the whole project, but the tax credit can also be recaptured after 5 years if work is done that don't meet the standards. And that is something that does get reviewed because the state does want to make sure that we're following our own rules. Yes.
A little unclear when you said the application. What are we talking about? I'm sorry.
Oh,
you
so
the building, were you talking about that specific building, or are you talking about the district in general?
So Westminster Historic District will have a nomination that covers the whole district and everything inside it. For a tax credit project, it's for your individual building. So every individual who wants to apply would do their own separate application. But again, that's only if you want to, not mandatory. Just one of the benefits that's available for being
The one
inside.
started in
listed district.
1980 that you referred to, that's for the entire district.
That is for the entire district. Yeah.
So we're not federally recognized at this time. Is that the case?
Oh, you are. Yes.
Oh.
So you were recognized in 1980 and now we're updating.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So you would think I would know this, right?
No, that's
You know,
okay.
involved. Anyway, thank you.
You may not. So that's the thing, because there aren't really restrictions. If you're not keyed into it, you may never have known if you didn't live here in 1980. Yes.
Flattered knowing that our homes were in the historic district.
Okay.
I know some of my neighbors, their home was built after 2020
Mhm.
and they still received the letter. So that being said, who and how was that decided whether our homes were part of that historic district? That's number one. Number two, if our home is part of the historic district, does that mean that we have to come to the historic commission if we want to fix something on the interior or the exterior of our homes?
So for your first question, the boundaries were decided in 1980 based on survey work. We follow the National Register guidelines for how you build boundaries, and you're trying to get the biggest concentration of historic resources, but there's always going to be new buildings inside a district because it is a big area. And so there's a list of what we would call contributing and non-contributing. So houses that were built in like 2020 are just going to be non-contributing to the district. But then I'll let Chris answer.
So, okay, so okay, so there's a boundary, and it's drawn pretty broadly, and inside is most of the resources that are historic, but there are a few that are not historic. Like my next door neighbor, there was a fire there and there was a new house put in there about 2020, and their house looks very historic. They made a lot of work to make it look historic, but it's not historic. And so, although they're part of the overall boundary, their house is not historic. So there are a few folks who may be within the historic boundaries, but their buildings are not necessarily historic. Mhm. Well, you may be declared historic as our process goes on because your building's more than 50 years old. Mhm.
If you would go and get a credit, okay, from the city or state or the Fed, then you are restricted. But just because you're within the historic district and you live in a historic home, there, I can do whatever renovations I want to do, interior, exterior, as long as I'm not getting a tax credit, I can do what I want to do.
Yeah.
That's what you're.
The only restriction that I'll take a little step is if you had to do a demo permit, as every other city resident has to, then you'd have to go to the city for a demo permit. If you want to level, some people want to level their garage, some people want to.
Like that, living in your house.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's the thing. If you accept the funds, then you kind of have to accept the restrictions. But otherwise, we're not going to go patrolling around in your house looking to see if you've changed a faucet. Honest to gosh, I don't have that kind of life in me left. But if you'd like to have some tax credit money towards updating all your plumbing, then our opinions are going to have to stick with our money. Do you see what I mean? But if you want to just do your own thing with your own plumbing, but sometimes we can help you with historic plumbing, for example. There might be some advice we can help you with. So that's it. Sorry to grab this from you.
No, I wanted to check with Chris just to make sure I understood the local limits. There is never going to be state review of a National Register, a private owner in a National Register listed district. If you accept our programs, then that's when you invite us in. But generally, we're not going to interfere with anybody.
My question is, I was aware that my property was historic when I moved in about 17 or so years ago. But my understanding was that I'm considered condos. I'm on John Street, lots of renters there. But my understanding was that the outside facade, we were condos because the outside facade had to remain the same. So when we painted them, when I got new windows in my property, I made sure I got bars in the window, not bars, but the lattice or whatever it is in there. That the front but is that not the case? Like I can do we didn't
So,
is that what you're saying?
I don't know that they are going to be able to. You guys have to go back and look at the title or look at different things for that. If you were told that there might be a reason that has something.
Right. This was many years ago, and now we've been through several condo managers, and it's just a mess. Yeah, I don't, and nobody knows where it came from. In fact, I was just having a discussion with our current condo company or manager, and because it's only 7 of us, it's not very many, and she was saying that we weren't historical, and I was like, well, I always thought we were, and then I got the letter, so yeah.
So you are definitely
Right.
So here's the thing, especially particular properties, it'd be best to come talk to us. But, in general, if I can speak in generalities, sort of keeping the historic fabric looking the same way, feeling the same way, working the same way, that's in general better for the entire district.
Right. No, I understand. I was okay.
So-
I was like when I did my screen door, we wanted clear glass, don't paint it. Don't like that was the understanding that I had. So,
But we didn't tell you that probably.
no, well, it was a realtor long ago.
Yeah. So you would come to us, and if you wanted our opinion, and we'd be happy to help you out with it. But
Okay.
if we don't have some hook, like a tax credit, Can't force you.
Okay.
We would just ask that you would be a good citizen of the district and contribute
Okay.
by doing things the way everybody else has sort of got it.
Okay.
So Melissa, do you want me to turn it over to Elizabeth or should we do a few? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I saw some eyes glazing over. And I just want to say, you know, the you've noticed how professionalized the National Register has become and how many checks and boxes there are. And when we first did it for the bicentennial many, many years ago, it was a lot looser. The rules really weren't there. It was also very narrow to architecture. If you look over our National Register nomination for Westminster, it's really very much windows, doors, and roofs and not much else. The one thing I wanted to point out for most of you, who's ever heard of Corbett's charge? Anybody? Everybody in this room pretty much knows Corbett's charge. You know what? That's not on our National Register form of important historic places because it wasn't architecture at the bicentennial. Today, we would like to have that recorded as an important layer of history. So there's a lot of work to be done that's a little bit non-architectural, right? We're looking at Greektown. We're looking at Irish Town. We're looking at some of the softer sides of history that'll flesh out our understanding of downtown. And we all know this, right? So we're really going to beef it up. And Elizabeth Comer is here with her company to do that. So maybe would it be time for Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think, and then we could do more questions if we need to at the end. So Elizabeth Comer is the one doing the work of updating the National Register. She's working with Edie Wallace, a historian, Paula Reed, architectural historian, who's worked all over Carroll County in Western Maryland. Rob Warner is doing the GIS and maps, and Gus Call and Cassie Pohl, you might have seen out, who they started doing on the ground field work, research, seeing what's there in preparation of doing the nomination.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much. It really is a pleasure to be here to speak with you tonight about this Westminster Historic District update. And as you've already heard, we're not changing the historic district. We're not changing the boundaries in any way. But what we are doing is bringing it into the 21st century. The work that was done for the bicentennial was done really well, given the standards of that time, the research that people were doing. It was pretty much bricks and mortar. It was, but that was then. Now what we're doing is looking again at the context, bringing it forward to with a period of significance that goes to 1976, and then looking at other areas of research like Greektown, like Irish Town, like the Pony Express. I mean not Pony Express, the rural mail service and things like that. So, oops, I pushed the wrong button. There we go. So first of all, thank you for coming tonight. This is a great turnout. I mean, I've done a few of these up in Western Maryland as well more recently, and I'm just thrilled to see all of you here so interested in this process and what it means to you and to the whole, to the whole town, the city. And we hope this meeting will give everyone, our intent is to give you a much better understanding of the goals and the benefits of the project, and then to hear your concerns as well of the community. So I wanted to share this map. I was in New York a couple weekends ago and going, looking at maps because maps are what matter. And I found this map in an Upper East Side antique shop. It was a fortune, but they sent me a high res PDF of it for free. But look, what's the center of the universe? That would be Westminster. So that map ended up in New York. It was part of a Maryland collection that was purchased by an antiques dealer. So I I think that's a map we need to definitely get back here to Westminster if we can. So our team, as you heard, architectural historians, archaeologists, GIS mapping experts, and then, of course, people taking photographs and recording what is here. So this is a scan of your June 23rd, 1980 National Register nomination form, the first page. And now we will be updating that dramatically. The 1980 boundary, west of US Route 140 on Maryland routes 97 and 32. At that point, 1,400 principal structures, and by that we mean 1,400 basically residences and commercial buildings, and then the ancillary structures like garages and possibly even at that point some outhouses were there. There were 1,481 parcels, and it's 393 acres. So that is a GIS of the 1980 structures within the historic district. So this is a current map of this is the current, again, we're not changing the boundaries of the historic district at all, but you can see that there are now 1,944 principal structures and 1,497 parcels. And again, as I said, 393 acres. That has not changed. So it's a very large historic district, and we are looking at each and every part of it. So Jessica went over the National Register of Historic Places really well. Listed properties are a wide range of structures, archaeological sites from the recent past as well as the ancient past. And they all are determined to, tell us something about life and tell us something about history, and it's really a recognition of the importance of those structures. So it's really something you can be very proud of, to have to be part of a historic district. And one thing I want to point out, one thing that I always tell people, there is a degree of protection from harm to being in a historic district. And I'm going to give you a really quick example. I'm from Frederick County, not Carroll County, but a little town I grew up near called Kriegerstown. About 5 months ago, a big, really big fiber optic transfer station of some denomination, I don't know, huge building, huge, well, 3 huge buildings actually, were slated to be put on this lovely agricultural field. And it didn't belong there. There were no jobs being created. There were many problems with it. But the main problem we pointed out is that it had the visual impact of it on this little tiny historic district called Kriegerstown was going to be just awful. And so we pointed that out, and that was not the reason the project didn't go forward, but it didn't hurt. So what I'm telling you is there's a degree of protection. People in that village considered this a harm, that this big, humongous these buildings were huge. We're going to go on this lovely agricultural field and really change the nature of the village. And it wasn't even in the historic district, but it was adjacent to it. So the view shed would have been altered beyond recognition. So again, that degree of protection from that kind of harm can be brought to bear on a historic district. So there's that too to always think about when you're in a historic district. So like a historic district, it works so that there's a when the district is nominated, or in this case updated, we are going to look at the period of significance. And that's one of the things that we've been spending a great deal of time on, because the period of significance back in the 1980s only took you through 1930. And of course, that's changed very much. We now consider that the period of significance here at Westminster will go from 1764, which is your founding, to 1976. And it reflects that it reflects that it's 50 years old, 50 years ago, the 50-year rule, as Jessica was talking about. But it really does bring a lot more of the structures that were non-contributing in the previous historic district description to contributing now. And with that, the benefits that can come, from that. So the Westminster Historic District, as I said, was signed by the keeper June 23rd, 1980. And this is a description of what we, the kind of the bricks and mortar. It was a continuum of residential and commercial architecture from the early vernacular styles through the 20th century national styles. And the basic building form was an early 19th century vernacular farmhouse containing Pennsylvania German or Georgian or English elements, and it was constructed in brick or frame. The buildings had cross gable roofs, symmetrical alignment of fenestration, and simple detailing. So the architectural changes through the 19th century were mainly reflected through ornamentation and applied to this basic form. So that's what was being talked about in 1980 when the historic district was formed. But this is why we're here tonight. This update will address the physical changes which have taken place since 1980 and address documentation deficiencies, such as the lack of a complete list of resources. As Chris said, they, sort of drew the boundaries, but didn't go, piece by piece, if you will, lot by lot. So this will correct that deficiency with a complete list of resources and total resource count, which of course we already have. And it will include an expanded historic context, very important, that examines many things, including the role of African American, Irish, and Greek communities in the city of Westminster, the Civil War history, and the rich variety of architectural resources, as we've already described. And then we're going to be looking at the National Rural Free Postal Delivery System in Westminster and Carroll County, because that's also of interest to the history. So it's just a much more broad and inclusive look at what is Westminster and why is Westminster important. One of the other things that we're going to be able to do, which wasn't available in 1980, is a GIS database. So this is going to be developed by us in cooperation with the city GIS department, and it will provide information about the individual structures within the historic district. And it will include aspects like you'll be able to see, is my house contributing or non-contributing to the historic district, the address, the tax parcel. A lot of this information is already in SDAT, but we're going to be incorporating that into this database so that you will be able to see what your structure, these facts, if you will, about your structure. And it will include, if there is an individual Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties listing, because some of the structures are individually listed as well. And then there'll be a simple description of the structures in this GIS database. So we've been working for several months now, and I know Jessica and Krista also mentioned, this is funded by the Maryland Historical Trust non-capital grant. So our research started months ago, and we've been putting together a Westminster Statement of Significance, which I won't read unless you want me to read the whole. This is just we're going to make this available, right? To everyone. Okay. So I know time is of the essence here, because I know I don't want to take too much of your time, because I know there'll be a lot of questions. So as Jessica also said, there are benefits to being a part of the Westminster Historic District. And again, the boundaries are not changing. We're simply updating the information and bringing the period of significance up through 1976 and expanding the context. What does it really mean? What is the history of the city? So listing on the register does not place, as I said before, and we'll say it again because it's really important. It does not place restrictions on your property. It does not place restrictions on what you do unless you do something that requires a federal or state or local oversight, which is, getting a grant or the tax credits. So there is, within the city of Westminster, whether it's a historic district, whether it's in the historic district or not, you have to get a demo permit. So that doesn't change, anything, but that's just sort of an overall, sort of an overarching requirement. But there are no other restrictions. You're in a historic district. It doesn't, you can take advantage of it or you can ignore it entirely. That's the best way to put it. The tax benefits, they're optional, as we've said, but they can, they can really be, I live in a historic district. I take advantage of them all the time. Yeah, they can be very, very useful because everything's getting more expensive. So where are we with this project? We've completed the initial physical survey of the properties and the landscapes within the historic district boundaries. We've taken photographs and we've been recording the histories of the individual properties, and that's ongoing. And so we're going to continue to document the history of the Westminster Historic District and examine it for its contribution to county and regional developments in order to identify how the community reflects important processes and movements in American history, including the role, as I said earlier, of the African Americans, the Irish, the Greek communities in the city's history, the Civil War history, and then, of course, the rural mail delivery system. And then the study will continue to seek community involvement, just like tonight, and ongoing in identifying important properties, important stories, people, and events in Westminster's history, which we can then document in the historic district context and statement of significance. So it's an opportunity to share if you have, know of a particular person or a particular building or a particular happening. This is the time to share it so that we can include it and make it absolutely as great a product. And maybe, in 50 years, they'll be updating it again, but we'll have a great way to, a great start, if you will. So we really want to hear from you. This email address, tharris@eacarchaeology.com. Or you can email Melissa here at the city or Chris, and I'm going to here a bunch of email addresses, any and all of which you can use to provide information that will help us in this very exciting and important project. So do you have any questions for me or for any of us? Oh yeah, Chris has something to say.
Clarification real quick.
Okay.
So you've heard so much tonight. This is a lot. But I just want to quickly be sure we have plenty of time for questions and clarify. Jessica is part of the state. The state is making sure we're doing the right thing with their grant. I want to thank the mayor because the city of Westminster provided also 50% of the funds for this project. So your city is really dedicated to us understanding better our historic resources. And within the city, the GIS is going to be taking all this information So it's easier for every person who lives in town to look up their address and see what's historic about their address. Now, because I've been playing this game for a long time as a volunteer, I could probably look up your addresses and find the history on your actual site through the state. But it's hard. I hate to say this, it's kind of hard. And part of this grant will be to make it easier so that you can just look up the information on your own property and know what's there that really matters. And the city's taken that as an important step for public service. So I want to thank the city for that. Elizabeth's our contractor. She's going to be gathering all this data because it's much more than any one of us can do. I'm with the Historic District Commission. I'm just a volunteer, but I've been a volunteer loving history here for 20 years. And kind of we're the ones who started this whole, people need to know what matters on their own property. And they need to understand that their stuff is historic and that it is a public benefit to all of us in the district. So now I'm going to ask for questions because one or more of us might be better for the question. Yes.
If you could just say it on the mic so we can get it recorded. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, I own a building in the historical district, and many years ago there was a plaque attached to the building. I don't know what happened to it. Can we get something like that to identify that we have an historic building? 58 West Main Street.
The Her Carriage House, was it that?
Yeah. You have, yeah. I've met you. Yeah, it was a very attractive square plaque that was attached to the building. And, I'd like to put that back on the building if possible. Yeah.
So, Mr. Yingling, yes. So it's interesting because I have one of those plaques too on my house. And I'll tell you a secret. Before my husband died, he bought it online. You can purchase your own. They are available. They say something very nice and generic, like this structure is part of the National Historic District. So that's the way we got ours, and I'll be happy to help look for one for you. We also have another plaque program coming up for the 250th, but that's going to be really limited to less than 50 homes that were here during the colonial period. And Jessica wants to say something.
The William Pomeroy Foundation just recently started a National Register plaque program to help fund the cost of plaques. So right now it's only available, I believe, to nonprofits and possibly commercial buildings, not individual residences. But that's some information we can share with the city to get the word out.
Jessica, that's fabulous because he has a commercial building. And the William G. Pomeroy Foundation just put up a new Patriot sign in the Westminster Cemetery. They are wonderful partners to be with. So I'm tackling you, and hopefully we'll be able to find some funds to help with that. Okay, next question. Do we get that for you, Mr. Yingling? Yep.
Okay, I come from a little different area because I'm a homeowner, I think, and and other properties around me are also historic. But with being historic, when does care and consideration of the property come in? Is there any kind of rules and regulations to make sure some of the rental properties around me are being held to certain standards and not being looking disheveled? And I because I know when you were taking pictures, I was like, oh, like I hope this mess of my neighbors is cleaned up before,
So I will say we don't want to be confused with the city beautification committee.
Okay, I just didn't
You
know
know-
because they were historic if it would say, oh, this window should not have wood in it, or something like that.
If
it would
there's an
have
actual
tempt.
code violation, we
I
do
just-
want to know about it.
Okay, no, that's okay.
Talk to me afterwards, just real briefly, and we can go over code violations
Okay.
and how to submit them.
I'm very familiar, but
Perfect.
we can talk again. Okay. But okay.
I'm
Lee
going to pretend to be
Magnuson,
Vanna
yes.
White if you guys just patient.
Mr. Lee Magnuson. Yes, Lee.
Just general information, but Why isn't McDaniel College in the historic district?
Oh, such an easy question. They have their own historic district.
Are
That's
they
why
on the National
McDaniels isn't in
Register?
with us.
Are they on the National Register
They are.
themselves? So, okay.
Can this be the first in Carroll County? It was like, no, darn, because McDaniel, and that is curious that McDaniel jumped right on that. But it was probably easier, quite frankly. This is a large historic district, and that's probably the reason McDaniel got there quicker.
Oh, I love easy questions.
So I'm just curious. I've seen the Christopher Weeks book and some of the things that he had highlighted, but there are buildings within the historic district boundary that are, from the mid 1800s and weren't in the book. And so I'm just confused about how things did or didn't get selected. And then it makes me wonder in this case, how things will or won't get selected as far as being elaborated upon.
I love that question about how come some things were skipped. I wish I was here then, because then I'd really be able to tell you whether they sent a postcard out and some people said we don't want to be on, or whether the researchers just didn't think that old building mattered. To be real honest, I've wondered myself over the years why some things got a little bit skipped and why they didn't. We're not skipping anything now. We'll look and evaluate everything. Jessica, could you have any ideas? Because that was a long time ago.
I don't have any ideas in terms of the book. In terms of the National Register nomination, there was this idea of writing about key buildings in the district that were kind of representative examples, and they wanted to capture kind of like the most important stuff because the program was still pretty new then. And it was like, we want to get this stuff before we don't have it anymore. But now when you do a National Register nomination, in the inventory, there will be a list of every single building, generally a short description of it, not a photograph of every building inside the nomination, but I think that will be for the database. There'll be current photographs for everything. It's just a different way that we capture information now. I'm not sure about, the book is trickier because it might just been who was willing to participate with his book research.
We're using the Christopher Weeks book and every other source that we can, but of course, that was one of the first things that we noticed as well, is that there were some real deficiencies. I mean, maybe that's not a polite way to put it, but we're not resting on the laurels of what was done previously, for sure.
So these email addresses, so in this room, there are a lot of sort of local amateur historians who are people interested in these things. So how is it best for us to communicate with you all? Is it just to send an email, or is someone specifically more appropriate than someone else? If we have kind of knowledge, or do we talk to Chris? How does this work for this communication?
I love this question because honestly, as I've been championing this project, I've had two people in Green Street come to me and say, well, my house is where Sergeant Shriver was a boy. He had two houses? That's interesting. It's really interesting. We're going to look into that. Maybe he's got 3 or 4. Who knows if they moved down the street a few times. But that kind of information, if you have some story you want to tell, maybe some understanding that you've got an interesting basement, or you've got something that can't be seen from outside that you want to share with us, I would send it to, where is it? Terry T. Harris, only because she's really going to be doing a lot of the compilation. Or you can send it to the Historic District Commission, right, Melissa?
I hope you don't mind me interrupting too. We certainly do have a lot of contacts, and on everybody's table space is 2 pamphlets of information. Just wanted to point out, we set up an online form as well as another way to contact us. So through this westminstermaryland.gov/NR update link, there's a picture that says a community input form. If you click on that, you can type in your contact information. There's a space, a large block for the information you have to share, as well as you can upload 4 photos. which is fun. So it's another opportunity. Some people like to email, some people like to call. There's a phone number listed on that website if you'd actually prefer to just talk to somebody. You might be typing and you're finding it's way too much information to include. We're also happy to set up meetings. So my name is Melissa Thorne. I'm on the community planning and development staff. Monday through Friday, I'm in the office and I'm happy to set up times. We also have volunteers to help with this project. So going into this, we weren't really sure what we would find, but we want to be available for this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for some of us to get stories and talk to people about it. Okay, thanks.
Good. I see a hand back here that's been patient.
So a question and a comment. The question is, on the letter that we received, there was a website link that would allow you to upload a photograph if you thought you had one that might be of interest. And I've gone to the link twice, and it just doesn't seem to be working. Sure. Oh, it has. Okay. Last week. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. So that's functioning then. Super.
All complaints go to Melissa.
All right. And then comment, with regard to the Maryland Historic Trust's state tax program, I was part of the program 1999, 2000, and a neighbor of mine who worked here in Westminster for the city as part of the city's preservation, turned me on to the program. And I remember telling her at the time, I have aluminum siding on my house. What's historic about aluminum siding? And she said, it doesn't matter. It's, your house is of a certain age, 1920s, certain style. And I said, all right. So I I went to the website, justifying why you think your property works or would be eligible. And then I listed out, I want to say 10 or 12 projects that I had to do to my house to get it from 1920 to 2000, to look like it was, but obviously following guidelines. And, that was everything from painting to refinishing floors to electrical work to plumbing to even the HVAC unit that we put in. Justification was it protects in the summertime, the heat and humidity. And they approved all, I don't know, 10, 11, however many, 12 projects there were. You had to provide photographic evidence. Here's what it looks like now. Here's what I plan to do. And when the project was done, I had to submit like phase 3. Here's what we did, photographic evidence. And when they signed off, yes, you received 20% of your expenditures as a tax credit on your state taxes. And so for a good number of years, when you were doing your state taxes, when you get to the end, it asks you that question: do you have a tax credit? And you're like, oh, yes, I do. Right. So I would just say, and it takes I would just say, spend a little time on the MHT site, find that tax program for homeowners, and don't get if you're interested, don't get discouraged by all the paperwork or the photographs you might have to take. It's a little bit of work, but in my case and a few other people that I recommended it to, it significantly paid off. Really, really did.
And he was not a plant.
Nah.
I don't even know this gentleman's name, but I do thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions tonight?
Threshold for the tax credit, income level threshold. I'm sorry. Is there a cap?
Jessica, talk about your grants.
So the cap is on your eligible expenses. So you can so if you have the most eligible expenses you can have is $250,000, and 20% of that would be the $50,000 credit. And it's fully refundable, and so you could take it over a number of years as well. So that's what the
There's
cap.
no
But
cap.
on your income can be whatever, but it's on your actual on what you expend. It can't be more than the 250,000, and then that number resets every 2 years. So say you have a lot of work you need to do, you could plan your projects so every 2 years you can come back to the program.
So Tony, I just sort of computed what you were asking. And for the city, there's no upper cap, but it's reimbursable to the taxes you pay. So if you have a property along Main Street and you pay high taxes, you'll recapture it quicker and you can do it within 5 years. I'm sorry. Taxes are low. I will agree with that actually. But if you have 5 years to capture the funds out of what you have paid for your taxes. Let's say your project is small, it's got to be over $5,000. You might be able to recapture that money all in 1 year. I had a project that was huge, 6 figures, and I never was able to capture all that 10% because I needed more than 5 years to do it.
But the point on the state, because I have done the state one before for a commercial project, you can deduct it from your income, okay? Not just the property taxes. The city is a property tax one. The state, you could take that directly against your income, and there's no income limit for that. That's my one point. And darn it, I forgot what my other question was. Oh, I know what I was going to say. You can hire, if you're intimidated by the process, if you're a homeowner or if you're a business, there are people, and I'm sure there's some people in this room that could help us find the people. Like I hired somebody when I did that commercial project because I didn't have the time to deal with that aspect of the project. So there are certainly people out there that will help you navigate the state and federal credits. And they know exactly what they're doing, and they can tell you, what kind of interior changes you can or cannot do and all that. So I highly recommend that. And that might be a resource that would be good for the city to be able to give to certain people, because I know it can be intimidating. I was intimidated by it. Hence why I found someone else to do it for me.
I can tell you I've filled out city requests several times and state and federal requests, and I'm free. So if you want me to help you, I am more than happy to help you out with that. All paperwork takes a little effort. It really does. Nothing's free, but me and some of the folks on our committee who can be helpful.
I want to circle back to the Christopher Weeks book. So I was in middle school when that came out, and my parents bought a copy and I read it. And I'm just curious, since it came up, was that produced or done in conjunction with the original application or becoming part of the historic district, or was that an independent project that he did?
This is another super easy question. If you open the cover to that Christopher Weeks book, it says, published by the city of Westminster in celebration of the bicentennial. There's not even any question. It's right on the paperwork. And I was amazed. I've been in a lot of places, and I used to work right across the hallway from the National Register when I worked with the Park Service. And I'd never seen another community request a byproduct like a book like that Christopher Weeks book. So to me, that is something you all have that many historic districts do not have. And as a result of this project, you will have all that information at your fingertips and hopefully very useful to every homeowner. Are there any other questions? Because I see none, and I'm telling you, we're more than happy to be helpful off table. Do our presenters have anything else to say? Anything like that. Fill out. Email us or call us, as Chris said, or upload those photos to the website that is working. Thank you very much, everyone. I want to thank our presenters, Elizabeth Comer, Dr. Becker, Mayor, and Jessica French from the Maryland Historic Trust. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. What's your story? Yeah, I would love, can you email, what's the easiest, African American or yes, okay. I can give you my, and I can give you my card.
And I have one thing about the store, where I live now, I live in Union. Is that part, that's right near McDaniel College, but that, way back when, like 20 years ago, when we were digging in the yard, to plant, they've got a cannonball, or iron, a horseshoe, a wool, like an old metal iron that you had to like heat up. We find a saturator in the yard, the same yard. Oh, that's very
I know a lot. I know a lot about.
That's what I was saying. He's neither as further all the time. Free. Blah blah. I believe he's fine. It's a way for me to type in that bird. Okay. Oh, I don't need to tell them. Have to use a place to actually. You're going to be getting all that new information, which I guess I should have already had. But there's so much. That's great. I heard say that there's other things. You're gonna get like what we have. I'm Jen. Yeah. And nice meeting you. You're local here.
See you, Mona.
I don't get paid. I'm actually.